15:46 hours GMT, that is 15:46 hours British Standard Time on Wednesday, the 15th of June, 2022. We are starting this edition of the KHOODEELAAR television channel dedicated to the theme of baby angel Geronimo. And this is the day which in the UK, in the mainstream so-called media, the headline news items are led by the intervention yesterday, Tuesday, by the European Court of Human Rights, based in Strasbourg, located in France. And the European Court of Human Rights is different from the European Union. The European Court of Human Rights is part of the Council of Europe. And the European Court of Human Rights made a ruling that stopped the member country of the European Council of Europe, United Kingdom, sending people from Rwanda. That flight was scheduled to take off yesterday, Tuesday, the 14th of June 2022, and the ruling stopped that flight. This is theoretically and in principle very similar in terms of effect to the UK's membership of the European Union when it comes to international law, in terms of rule of law, in terms of the due process. So we shall be talking a bit more about this in this edition, because one of the reasons why we absolutely opposed Brexit was because of the depravity, the cruelty, criminality, lack of compassion that has been the norm of English law, English judiciary. And what happened shortly before the European Court of Human Rights ruled against the UK's flight to Rwanda was the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom ruled in favor of the corrupt, the cruel decision to send people to Rwanda. A more clear contrast could not be imagined. Now, that's the kind of intervention that actually makes an uncivilized regime stop being uncivilized, at least for the time being, and is given the opportunity to take a step backwards from the uncivilized precipice. This is something that has happened in the past, not under the banner of the European Court of Human Rights, but the banner of the European Union, many times over the previous 4 decades. Whenever the United Kingdom behaved in a backward, uncivilized way, and in the form of the United Kingdom judiciary, the European Union's various directives came into force and came into effect, and that is what stopped the United Kingdom sinking into the pits, P-I-T-S, pits of depravity. The baby angel Geronimo is witnessing all of this. And the baby angel Geronimo is saying to himself that it is the European Union, European Court of Human Rights that alone could have intervened, to stop the harassment, the cruelty, the demonization, the defamation that the depraved DEFRA and depraved Boris Johnson regime inflicted on me, that is the baby angel Geronimo. In a country with more than 65 million people, baby angel Geronimo has been left alone to be targeted by the depraved criminals, the evil regimes. Not one single human being came forward, actually stood and stopped the depravity and the criminality being inflicted against the personality of the world's most innocent baby angel Geronimo. So baby angel Geronimo is saying, and we are saying with him, that if justice is denied, if fairness is denied, if cruelty is inflicted, if compassion is withdrawn, and unadulterated criminality unleashed on the most innocent target like the baby angel Geronimo, the only way that the targeted baby angel Geronimo and his likes and can avoid being targeted and attacked and violated in the way that baby angel Geronimo has been targeted for years by the depraved DEFRA, is for the United Kingdom as a country, as a state, to become more involved in the likes of the European Convention for Human Rights and European Court for Human Rights and European Court of Human Rights and European Court of Justice. Now, to what extent that is possible is another matter, because the so-called the numerical opposition in terms of the numbers of MPs in the main part of the UK Parliament, which is the House of Commons. The number of MPs in the House of Commons that belong to the so-called Labour Party is the highest number of MPs after the Conservatives. And there were more than the number of MPs that still belong to the Scottish National Party, SNP. So the Labour Party is being fronted by a licensed law trader called Keir Starmer. And according to today's kind of news in The Guardian online, Keir Starmer has been forced to kind of plea to the members of the Labour Party and his shadow cabinet to stop calling the leadership he represents boring. And in the so-called Prime Minister's questions that was staged about 4 hours ago, Keir Starmer made a bid to come across kind of relevant by using some of the scripts that have been written for him, that relate to Love Island and other pop kind of shows. And that is supposed to have been intended to make him come across not as boring. And today's Daily Telegraph, I think, which owned Boris Johnson for about 10 years and bribed him to the tune of billions of pounds and made him able to spend the money and get the resources and get the platform, which all of which allowed him to get into the position of leader of the Conservative Party. Now that title, The Telegraph, has ceased, stopped being such a platform for the depraved Boris Johnson. And one of the pieces written in today's Telegraph is by byline to the former cricketer Ian Botham. And Botham is saying that DEFRA is out of order and the DEFRA is unfit for purpose. And DEFRA is a disaster and it is hurting rural people and rural voters. Now, Ian Botham is no champion of democracy. Ian Botham is a conservative in every sense, with a small c, with a big C, and the Tory, with a big T and the small t. So Ian Botham has been given this platform. Whoever wrote the thing is irrelevant. He has agreed to have his name appear as the author of that piece. And it is critical of the depraved Boris Johnson regime and Boris Johnson leadership, not because Botham is for justice, but it's critical because that way, the way the Boris Johnson leadership is going, Ian Botham fears would end up with the Conservative losing too many votes at the next election, whenever the next general election takes place. And flagged on the front page of the same day's Daily Telegraph, Wednesday the 15th of June 2022, that is today, is another piece by a former advisor to Theresa May, Nick Timothy. Now, Nick Timothy says that Boris Johnson, following Margaret Thatcher in the way that Boris Johnson has been doing, and is showing that he is learning the wrong lessons from Margaret Thatcher. Now, that is closer to the reality of power. That is to say, Nick Timothy was very close to Theresa May for more than 2 years. Whether she was in power as Prime Minister, Conservative Prime Minister or not. So Nick Timothy knows that the kind of desperate sloganeering that Johnson has been indulging in by invoking Margaret Thatcher's various things, most notably the so-called right to buy, the kind of degeneration of the council housing, shows that Boris Johnson is taking the wrong lesson and they're following the Thatcher example in the wrong way. Whatever the details, either Ian Botham or Nick Timothy's pieces are only tips of the iceberg, because they are still very much supporters of the Conservative Party even fronted by Boris Johnson. And the Times is doing its Times owned by the dirty digger Rupert Murdoch, who also owns the filthy scum, the Sun. Despite all the various items of evidence that Johnson is getting it wrong by the item, these titles are still doing their bits to support him. And the way they are doing their bits to support Boris Johnson is to find kind of items of evidence with which they can condemn and expose Keir Starmer. Now, our campaign, world exclusively, has been saying for more than a year, I think, that Keir Starmer has politically murdered the Labour Party. That phrase, that concept, that idea, nobody else has said anywhere in the world. And these people coming around, the likes of Delia Smith, as featured in The Guardian, and others like in the Telegraph, the Ian Bertram and Nick Timothy, being critical of Boris Johnson, as a few days earlier, a former Conservative leader, William Hague, condemning Boris Johnson and his leadership, so called. These are critical. These are truthfully critical. But they're not critical enough. And they will never, ever match the clear moral, ethical denunciation of the moral, ethical, and fact based, evidence based, behavior based denunciation by our campaign, our movement, that has actually condemned Boris Johnson as depraved and Keir Starmer as the political murderer of the Labour Party. Of course, the political murder of the Labour Party has been taking place for longer than our description may suggest to people who are not fully aware of the long history of engagement by us in factually examining on a daily basis the behavior of the leadership of the Labour Party and of the Labour Party nationally, locally, regionally. We have not ever, we have not ever hesitated to condemn the Labour Party's leadership, condemn the Labour Party's behavior. Why? Not because we have a particular axe to grind. We don't. The reason is that there is an imperative based on the needs of the people in the country, ordinary people in the country, who deserve a regime, who deserve a government locally, regionally, centrally, that is accountable, that is fair, and that is not motivated by corruption. Now, in the case of the Conservatives, as fronted by Boris Johnson, the continuation of the corruption of the Conservative Party, as the bag carriers, as the tools of the big business crooks and criminals, has continued. And with Keir Starmer, there is no sign that Starmer is aware of this robbery of society, robbery of the people, and the degeneration of society by Boris Johnson. Now, in the case, as we have said before, of the treatment by Boris Johnson fronted regime, which includes DEFRA, which is fronted by George Eustice, the treatment of baby angel Geronimo has been symbolic as well as real and as well as current and contemporary. And we shall be, of course, continuing to update our commentary on the where that Boris Johnson's behavior and the DEFRA's behavior has been being consistent with our analysis. There is depraved, is corrupt, and it's criminal, and it's against justice, and it is evil. And as we have said also, that there is no opposition. The number of Labour Party MPs as fronted by Keir Starmer is the largest number in the opposition or on the opposition benches in the UK House of Commons. But they're not large enough. The number is not large enough. And even if there are significant numbers of MPs on the Labour benches, There is not enough Labour Party MPs that are morally, ethically, democratically inspired or active to take up the case for justice. Most certainly not a single one among the Labour Party MPs that has spoken to stop the harassment, the demonization, the vilification of the baby angel Geronimo. The baby angel Geronimo is the kind of example, the template, the model of a regime that will come into being after the fall of the inevitable fall of the depraved Boris Johnson and the depraved conservatives being ousted from office. Whoever comes in will be, of course, will include the Labour Party and will include others in whatever number it is not possible to predict at this stage, but there will be. And the fact that none of them has spoken out in defense of the innocent baby angel Geronimo shows that the regime that will come into being will not offer justice, not anywhere near the justice that is needed by the likes of baby angel Geronimo, deserved by the baby angel Geronimo, and deserved by others who are violated and whose rights have been violated and are being violated. We say it in the context of Tower Hamlets Council and in the contemporary topical context of Nadine Dorries, who is the so called culture secretary in the Boris Johnson cabal, to sell off, that is to say, make the currently funded Channel 4 structure different so that the sharks, big business, and shareholders can get hold of Channel 4 television and make it even worse than it has been. Now, as a campaigner for the founding of the fourth channel in the 1970s, which I was, I never found the actual operation of Channel 4 when it started to be anything near the role that we campaigned for. I have broadcast several times from Channel 4. Every single broadcast has been inspired by and linked to it and prompted by a campaigning issue or campaigning issues. And I've never found the channel as delivering. So, what we'll do, we'll just stop here. This edition will stop here and come back shortly. This is a break, maybe it will last about 10 minutes. So, we have been on air for just 23 minutes, just under 24 minutes. So, we'll come back in